This happened to me 10 years ago, and I still remember it like it was yesterday. Whenever I think about it, it still sends shivers down my spine. It might sound exaggerated, but I don't think I've ever been this close to hell. This event took place on a summer evening, and whether you believe it or not is up to you. Here's the story. I was staying at a dorm and decided to visit my family home during a break. I did this often. I hadn't seen my parents and sibling in a while and missed them dearly. Our family home wasn't too far away, but it wasn't exactly close either. I had told my family I would be home that day, and they were aware of it. However, they mentioned they'd be visiting my aunt and might be late. Normally, my dad would pick me up, but he was accompanying my mom. They told me to take a cab. They wanted me to wait for them at home, and honestly, I was too tired to argue. I just wanted to rest, and to be frank, I don't like my cousins. They're way too noisy. Anyway, I took a cab and started my journey home. By the time I arrived, it was already midday. As I stepped out of the cab and looked at the house, something caught my eye. A movement behind the curtains. It was as if there was someone there. I couldn't see clearly, but I was almost certain I saw the silhouette of a person. No one was supposed to be home. Could it be my sibling? That was the only possibility I could think of at the time. I got out of the car and walked toward the front door. When I arrived, I knocked and waited, but no one answered. This was strange. I could have sworn someone was inside, but the windows and doors were locked. I thought maybe I was just imagining things because of how tired I was. We always kept a spare key hidden outside. It wouldn't be wise to reveal the location here. I retrieved the key and unlocked the door. For a moment I hesitated. I can't quite explain why, but I felt like my whole body was warning me not to go inside. But there was no logical reason for this feeling, so I dismissed it and stepped in. The house was silent, eerily silent. No one was there. I was exhausted, so I headed straight to my sibling's room and lay on the bed. The last thing I remember was falling into a deep sleep. When I woke up, it was already dark and my family still wasn't home. I called them, and they said they'd be a little later than expected. Feeling hungry, I decided to go to the kitchen to grab something to eat. The lights were off, so I made my way to the hallway to turn them on. As I did, I started hearing faint sounds from the kitchen, like someone softly humming a melody. It was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard, almost hypnotic. It sounded like a woman's voice, and it was pulling me toward it. I was terrified but unable to resist. Slowly, I reached for the kitchen door handle. My arm felt like it was moving on its own. The moment I touched the handle, the humming stopped. Silence. I tried convincing myself it was just a sound from outside. I was searching for a logical explanation, or maybe I was just still half asleep. Hesitating, I opened the door, but the kitchen was completely dark. Nothing was there. The windows and doors were locked. I told myself my mind was playing tricks on me, or that I was imagining things because I was groggy. I grabbed something to eat and went back to my sibling's room to lie down again. And that's when it happened. As I walked to the room, I turned off the hallway lights. Just as I did, I felt a chilling presence behind me. My heart started pounding, and instinctively, I turned around, and I saw it. Standing in the doorway was a figure. It was dressed in black, as if wrapped in silk. No face, no eyes. Nothing was visible, but I could clearly see it as standing there. It faced me, with its back to the door, completely still, like a lifeless corpse. But I could feel its gaze, as if it was studying me from head to toe. I couldn't hear anything except the sound of my heart pounding wildly. All I remember is screaming and running into my sibling's room, slamming the door shut and locking it. I hid under the blanket, trembling. I reached for my phone to call my mom, or maybe the police, but it wasn't there. Then I remembered I'd left it in the kitchen while eating. I couldn't go back to the kitchen. What if it was still out there? The kitchen door was right next to the main door. I had no idea what to do. I felt like a trapped animal, praying for that thing to leave. Then I heard it. 3 knocks on the door, and then silence. My heart was racing, but that wasn't the scariest part. The most terrifying thing came next. A voice. A voice I recognized. It was my mom's voice. "Son, open the door. I miss you." But there was no warmth in it, no emotion at all. I was frozen. Something deep inside me screamed not to answer. Then it spoke again. "Son, why won't you open the door? Don't you miss me?" But it wasn't my mom. My mom always called me by my name. Only my dad used to address me like that. I covered my ears and tried to block it out. I think it went on for about 30 minutes, repeating at intervals, and then silence. I wanted to get my phone from the kitchen, but what if it was still there? I decided to stay in my siblings' room until my family came home. I don't know how long I waited, but eventually I heard the sound of the front door opening. A familiar voice called out, "Son, are you home?" It was my dad. "Dad?" I shouted back. "You're here? Why weren't you answering your phone?" My sibling ran to hug me, and when I saw my mom, I embraced her tightly, which surprised her. I never usually did that because I was shy, but I didn't care this time. I told them what happened, though I didn't go into too much detail. They were shocked, which was understandable. I didn't want to worry them too much, especially since they lived in that house. I considered myself mature for my age. After that, nothing strange happened during my stay. When the break ended, my dad dropped me off at the dorm. I never told anyone else about this. They'd probably think I was crazy. But when I searched online, I found many people with similar experiences. It was comforting to know I wasn't losing my mind. But what if there really was something there? What about my family? These thoughts haunted me every time I visited the family home. It's been 10 years. My family still lives there, and nothing else has happened since. But I'll never forget that night, especially that beautiful melody. It's still stuck in my mind. Every year in the early 2000s, my parents would send me to Poland for the summer. It became a tradition, a routine I both loved and dreaded. I always flew out as the school year ended, and I'd spend the next 2 months far away from home, nestled in a remote village that time seemed to forget. My grandparents lived on a small farm surrounded by endless fields of corn and wheat, and in the dead heat of summer, the air would hum with cicadas and the creak of old wood. The summer would start predictably enough. I'd spend the first week in the small town where my best friend lived. She had once been my next-door neighbor before her family moved back to Poland, and we remained close through long-distance letters and annual reunions. Her father would eventually drive us both to my grandparents' farm, where we'd stay for the rest of the break. Most days were full of sunlight, sweat, and play, but something about that one summer still haunts me. Something that happened late one night, something we never really got answers to. My grandparents' farmhouse was old, the kind of place where doors didn't quite close right and the wind whispered things through cracks in the wood. Their house was always full, overflowing really. That summer, it was my grandparents, my great-grandmother, my aunt and uncle, 5 of my cousins, my best friend, and me. Nights were crowded and loud with snoring, whispered conversations, and creaking floorboards. With space tight and heat unbearable inside, 4 of us, my 2 cousins, my best friend, and I decided we'd pitch a tent in the backyard. It was a large garden area that backed into the fields. The tent sat just a few feet from the house, near a glass door that opened onto a small concrete patio outside the back room. It gave us quick access to the house if we needed it. We loved that tent. At night, we'd sneak out of it and walk through the village, using our flashlights as we explored gravel paths and overgrown fields. The adults were so overwhelmed with people in the house, they rarely kept track of when we came or went. In a way, it was our secret freedom, wandering under the stars, talking about the future, sharing stupid stories and laughing until we cried. The village itself was small and deeply isolated. Houses were scattered far apart with thick forests and endless crops between them. On a clear night, you could see the Milky Way. So dark was the sky. There were no streetlights, no sounds of traffic, only the occasional dog barking or the rustling of something unseen moving through the brush. It was both beautiful and eerie. Looking back, I think it was the silence that made everything that happened feel so much more intense. One evening, the household was quieter than usual. Several family members had gone into town for the night, leaving just my grandparents, my great-grandmother, my best friend, and a few of us kids behind. My friend and 1 cousin were inside watching a movie in the back room next to the patio, while I stayed outside with my other cousin in the tent. We lay on our sleeping bags, half awake and whispering about stupid stuff. Summer crushes, what we'd do the next day, whether or not ghosts were real. The sides of the tent flapped softly with the breeze. The air smelled like dry grass and something faintly metallic, like dew forming early on the tools my grandfather kept near the shed. Suddenly, we heard it. Footsteps, not fast, not loud, just deliberate. Soft crunches on the gravel path that wrapped around the back of the house. We both froze mid-sentence. Then silence. For a moment, we thought it might be my grandfather checking on us. But something felt off. My grandfather had a very particular walk. He dragged his left foot a little from a bad knee. These steps were even and unfamiliar. We didn't move. We didn't speak. Every breath felt deafening. Then the sound started again, this time circling the tent. Whoever it was didn't speak, didn't call out, just walked, around and around. I felt my cousin's hand grip mine tightly. We waited, hearts thudding in unison. Then the footsteps stopped near the glass patio door. We couldn't see anything from inside the tent, but we both heard the unmistakable sound of the door handle being rattled. Not jiggled like someone fumbling, pulled, then twisted slowly, like someone testing to see if it would open quietly. It didn't. I whispered, "We need to look." Against every instinct screaming at me not to, we unzipped the side of the tent just a sliver. The tent fabric crackled quietly as we peeled it back, both of us peering into the darkness like terrified animals. That's when we saw it. A tall figure stood just outside the glass door, his back slightly hunched. He wasn't trying to get in anymore. He was just standing there now, facing the door, his arm by his side. The cherry of a cigarette glowed bright red in the dark, flaring slightly as he took a long drag. I couldn't make out his face. His features were completely obscured by shadow. But his posture, his silence, and the way he moved, there was something deeply wrong, something too calm. Then he turned. Not toward us, toward the garden gate. He walked away slowly, smoke trailing behind him. He never looked around, never said a word. We didn't breathe until he disappeared into the fields. My cousin and I scrambled into the house, locking the back door behind us. My friend and other cousin were still on the couch, eyes wide when we told them what had happened. None of them had heard the door being rattled. No one else in the house had woken up. We all ended up cramming into one bed that night, terrified to fall asleep. The next morning, we told my grandparents. My grandfather checked the yard, but there were no clear footprints, just scattered grass and some cigarette ash on the patio. At first, they thought maybe it was a neighbor, someone drunk or confused. But 2 days later, we heard something on the village radio that made my blood run cold. A man had escaped from a mental hospital 3 towns over. He had been institutionalized for sexually assaulting and murdering his sister. We never found out if the man who visited our tent was him. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe it was just someone passing through. But he wasn't from our village. Of that, I'm sure. Everyone knew everyone there, and no one would stand outside a house in the middle of the night, rattling doors and smoking in silence. Over 20 years later, I still think about that night. I wonder what would have happened if that door had been unlocked, if he had decided to walk to the tent instead, if we had made noise. I still dream about that glowing cigarette in the dark, and I still don't sleep well in tents. Let me start this story by saying I'm a teenage girl, and one warm July night, I was with 4 of my friends swimming in a public lake. It was completely empty, but that wasn't exactly uncommon. I suppose you could say it was almost in the middle of nowhere. We were a bit of a ways out, on a small platform used for jumping off of and such. We played Marco Polo, King of the Hill, and all types of other weird games that teens play. At around 9 p.m., the 5 of us sat down, out of breath and swatting away mosquitoes. I decided to go check my phone, which was on the shore, to see if I had gotten a text from my mom. One of my friends, we'll call her Kay, came with me as I was a little anxious about being separated from the group. While my back was turned, a boat pulled up eerily close to the platform, which my other 3 friends were still on. "Hey!" a male voice said. My heart started pounding, and I turned around to see who said it. I thought it could have been my guy friend, but it sounded nothing like him. I looked up and saw a middle-aged man in the boat. It wasn't a canoe, but rather more like a speedboat. There was a guy with dark hair inside, and he looked to be in his 30s. "Lake's closed. You guys gotta go," he said. This was weird because there was no curfew for that lake, although it was for residents of the area only, which my friend and his dad were. We all gave each other a look of, what the hell is he talking about? My friends who remained on the platform slowly got off, mumbling apologies and saying goodnight, hoping to avoid conflict. I continued to swim to the shore when I heard him say something that sent a chill down my spine. "Good night, guys. Actually, do you want to ride?" My mouth fell open slightly. I was incredibly shocked. I know enough about stranger danger and all that stuff, so I was on edge. To give some context on how sketchy this was, I need to describe how the lake was set up. My friend's dad's house is on a lonely road, which is in a pretty secluded, woodsy town right on the state line. To the left of his house, there's a dirt path which is extremely long and leads to a park. There used to be a summer camp there, but it got shut down. If you walk even further down the path, it leads you down a small hill to the lake. All along this path is woods, not houses or anything. The other side that surrounds the lake consists of 2 to 3 large houses, which if you lived in any of them, you'd be swimming close to them, which we were not. Obviously, we declined, and the man looked a little disappointed but drove off. The story, unfortunately, doesn't end there. Skip ahead a few minutes, we're walking along the long dirt path, still in our swimsuits and our towels draped over our shoulders. We're talking and laughing about what just happened, but we're all pretty shaken. We had never experienced anything like that previously, and the fact that he offered to give 5 random teenagers in swimsuits a ride on a small boat in the middle of a secluded lake? Yeah, sketchy as hell. We're listening to music and dancing down the path when we hear a noise. I look at Kay and she shoots me the same look of bewilderment. I look to my other friends and I just know they heard it too. It sounded like rustling leaves, then a grown man weeping. It didn't sound like he was in pain or afraid, but rather like the sound a small child makes to try and get attention. We turned on our phone flashlights and scanned the area where the noise had come from, but couldn't see anything. I was shaking like a leaf and was practically pissing myself, yet we were still pretty far from the house, about a half mile, I believe. I practically begged my friends to keep walking. Nobody went into the woods, and we were all sort of frozen in fear. I pleaded again, and everyone kept moving again. I have pretty severe anxiety, and even though that noise could have been anything, the idea of someone hiding in the woods, their intentions unknown, made me want to vomit. We kept walking down the road, and we heard the weeping noise again. At this point, I started tearing up and shaking much harder now. My friends Kay, and let's call her Jess, grabbed my hands and tried to calm me down, even though they were scared too. My other 2 friends were only a bit behind us, but I yelled at them in a shaky voice to keep close to us. We heard the weeping again, followed by a branch crunching and leaves being moved. I completely fucking lost it at this point, bawling my eyes out, and I broke into a run. I gripped my friends' hands as hard as I could and dragged them along, sobbing and out of breath. There was a metal gate that you had to go around to get further down the path into my friend's home. I ran around the side, climbed over a rock, and I'm pretty sure jumped down into a small patch of poison ivy, but I kept running. Once we all reached the driveway, I collapsed and sobbed hard. I finally pulled myself into the house, and my friends and I sat in the kitchen, calming ourselves down, and we started talking about what it could have been. We all have no idea, but we agreed to never go back down that godforsaken path past dark ever again. My friend's dad doesn't live there any longer, but I think about this incident whenever we hang out together. We don't think the man in the boat and the possible weeping man had any correlation, but they happened in such close proximity to each other, and that's what really terrified us. And that's a wrap for today's video. I hope you enjoyed these chilling stories. If you did, don't forget to drop a comment with your favorite one, hit that like button, and subscribe for more spine-tingling tales coming your way. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.